everybody wants to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 149th Street at the bench.
Hey guys, welcome back to the bench. Today I'm going to be sharing 3 tips that are going to help you to pick a graffiti tag name. And at the end of the video, I have a resource that's going to give you some tag name ideas. I'll be talking about a few things that you definitely want to be keeping in mind, as well as a few things that you definitely want to avoid when picking your first tag name. Now, if you've been a long-time subscriber here on the channel, you might remember a video like this in the past, but we recently updated our whole entire tutorial series, which you can check out in the cards above, and that's a playlist that teaches you everything you need to know about graffiti, and we didn't come out with a video on how to pick a tag name, so I figured this had to be part of that series, and I wanted to update that too. If you already have a tag name, especially for you more experienced graffiti artists, let us know how you came up with your name in the comments down below, and especially if there's a story behind it, I'd love to hear it. Alright, so step 1, you're going to want to write out the alphabet. All of that on a sheet of paper. Physically write it out, and I recommend circling the letters you enjoy the most. The ones that you look at and you go, you know what, I can get down with that letter. I like the way that letter looks. When doing this, do not concern yourself with letters that you think might be hard. The difficulty of a letter is irrelevant, and I'll explain why in a minute. Only concern yourself with how you enjoy the letter. Prioritize that above all else. Once you've circled the letters that you really like, then go back through the alphabet and put a little square or a different shape for the letters you kind of enjoy. The ones that you're not crazy fond about, but you don't dislike them either. This is going to give you some variety, some options in order to make other words. And what you're going to very quickly find out is the fact that sometimes you might have a letter that you're not crazy about, but when positioned with other letters, suddenly that combination makes for something really enjoyable. Something that you can very much have fun doing. So now that you have all these letters, try to make as many words as you possibly can with those letters. And because you're new, play around with all of these names. Don't hesitate to jump from one name to the next in order to see how it feels. This is very low investment here in the beginning. Understand, most new graffiti artists, they change their name after a few years. They'll pick one, and this first name usually acts as training wheels. Now, obviously, there are some graffiti artists that keep one name for their entire graffiti careers, but most people change their name 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 times before settling on a finalized name. And this happens over the course of a few years. So play around with these different names that you've written down. Have a good time. Prioritize that above all else. If you're just starting off in graffiti, you're finding this art form a little bit difficult to learn, pick up our brand new book. It's a comprehensive guide to graffiti. It'll make the learning process a breeze. We've helped thousands of people with this book. We take decades of information and condense it down to something that's easy to digest, easy to understand, and easy to follow along with. So whether you're brand new to graffiti, first day in this art form, or you're decades into this, pick up the book in the description. It'll help you out a bunch. One of the best ways to pick a tag name is if you already have a nickname or you have something that means something to you, use that as your tag name. Part of the reason why I used Grim was because I always wore hoodies, and people used to refer to me as Grim even before I began using the name. So I just used it as my name. Now that's certainly one way to come up with a tag name, but understand that's not 100% necessary. You don't have to choose a name that means something to you. And that's why we have this next method to come up with a tag name. And the third way to come up with a tag name is to have it bestowed on you. Now, in all admission, this one's pretty rare, but it does happen occasionally, so I figured I'd go ahead and bring it up. If you're around other graffiti artists, there's a small chance that somebody might actually bestow a name onto you. And this is a great honor to have something like this happen. But this can also be a bit of a challenge because it's not a name that you necessarily picked. It's not a name that's made out of letters that you may even like. But yet, you may feel compelled to keep the name. Understandably so. Obviously, you can always choose to change that too. You don't have to take the name. But this is one way to certainly get a name. Earlier I said, don't concern yourself with the difficulty level of any of these letters. And the reason I said that is because you're brand new to graffiti. Everything you do is going to be amateur. You're not going to be producing anything amazing or great. Now, that isn't to say that you shouldn't enjoy or you shouldn't love some of the stuff that you produce. You certainly can. And you can more than certainly be very proud of some of the stuff that you create as well. But it'd be unreasonable in order to expect that you'd make anything fundamentally correct so early on. That would be like going into the gym for your very first time and trying to lift 300 pounds your first day. You have to work up to these things, and it takes time. It takes practice. So at this early of a skill level, everything is going to be hard for you. And if it's not, then it's only because you're missing out on your mistakes. And that's why I stress early on, focus on having fun. Focus on enjoying the art form. Once you decide that you actually want to progress and you want to take things a little bit more seriously and you want to take your graffiti to the next level, that's when you can begin to focus on the fundamentals, and you can focus on separating your fun drawings from your practice. Those are two different things. Now, don't get me wrong, you can certainly find your practice to be fun. I do. But one is you just studying the fundamentals with zero style added to those drawings. That way you can focus on those fundamentals. And the other one is you adding style. That way you can explore fun ideas, fun concepts, and have a good time creating what you want to create. Over time, as you do this and you begin to practice and have your fun drawings and alternate between the two, you're going to see some progression. And you're you're gonna begin to gain new preferences for certain letters. And it's here where you might end up changing your name now that you have a little bit more information about how graffiti functions. And if you feel compelled to do that, then by all means, go for it, change your name. But what I want to advise is that you never change your name because you find it difficult to do. Every single name has their pros and cons. Every single name works perfectly fine. The name is never the problem, the artist is. And that's really important to remember. All too often, new graffiti artists have a tendency to change their name because they find a certain name difficult, not realizing that it's only difficult because they're not taking the time to study and practice the fundamentals. They change their name to something that they think is easier, when in reality, it's not really that it's easier, they're just not seeing their mistakes. Over time, they run into issues with that second name as well, and the cycle repeats itself. Learning your name is part of graffiti. That's the whole joy behind it. But in order to learn your name, you have to be willing to fail. I mean, I'll show you right now. I do this a lot on the channel. I show this canvas off, and here is one of my failures. This was the first time I ever did graffiti on a canvas, and this was back when I had very first gotten the name. I was 6 years into graffiti at this point. Understand that, right? Like, I clearly was not practicing at all. And this is an abomination. This is a definite failure. But had I stopped and changed my name because I found this difficult, I would never have gotten to the point that I'm at now. So you have to be willing to fail with a name in order to figure out its ins and outs, to learn how the name actually functions, because every name can work. Every name does work. You just have to work at the name. So if you want to start tagging, well, it stands to reason you're gonna need a name to begin doing graffiti with. And the very first rule about picking your name in graffiti is you cannot have the name of a graffiti legend. But what constitutes a graffiti legend? Because for a brand new graffiti artist, they don't know the difference. They're gonna hop on Google, hop on Instagram, or any social media and see somebody with a lot of followers and think, man, I can't have that name. But understand, a graffiti legend is somebody who's changed graffiti on a global scale. Nobody expects a brand new day one graffiti artist to know who the legends are. So if it turns out you've happened to choose the name of a legend, well, be respectful, change the name. With that said, understand, not everybody with a massive following on social media, not everybody who's seen a documentary, and not everybody who's seen a magazine is a graffiti legend. In fact, most of them aren't, right? You can choose to use the name Grim, and hey man, more power to you, have fun with the name. I'm not a legend, you know? So most names in graffiti are up for grabs. And this is where you'll get some people that say, oh, well, this person's really well known, but they're not a legend. Legends are the only people with name exclusivity. Those are the only people. And in order to be a legend, you have to change graffiti on a global scale. For this reason, the old school generation of graffiti artists tend to get a pass because the vast majority of them built the foundation in which we all work off of. So you may have plenty of those guys who aren't really well known, but they're still considered legends, and as a result, you don't use their names. And the reason this is a rule is because every single name in the world is taken pretty much. I've seen people make up words and those names are also taken. So the likelihood that you're gonna find a name that no one else has is pretty much slim to none. Now, something else to understand is it's going to be up to each individual to decide whether or not they want to use the name of a person who might be in their city. Oftentimes, new graffiti artists contact me and they say, hey John, there's a guy who lives not too far away and he's got the same name that I have and I didn't know he existed before. In a situation like this, it'll be up to the individual to decide whether or not they want to still, number one, use a name. Number two, they can decide to add a prefix or a suffix to distinguish themselves from the other person. Or number three, they can decide to change their name entirely. At the end of the day, as long as it's not a legend, the decision is really yours. Some graffiti artists don't take too kindly to this, so why might you want to avoid using somebody else's name? Think of using somebody else's name as being no different than, say, starting a band and naming it Metallica. Due to the fame of Metallica, people are gonna look at your band and go, you're not really Metallica, what are you doing? Why would you name your band that? No one's gonna take you seriously, and you're gonna immediately discredit yourself as a result of that, because Metallica's high renown. It's not much different for graffiti. If you decide to use the name of a legend, that's what's gonna happen to you. No one's gonna take you seriously. However, if you're a musician and you decide to start a band and you come up with a name and it just so happens that some other small band also has that name, even though they might be a little bit more popular than you are, well, nobody knows about either of you. So both of you guys get to, for lack of a better term, make a name for yourself. Now, the other small band may not like that, but they're not Metallica, so you can kind of still use the name and get away with it because nobody knows them either, even if they might be pretty big in your area or whatever the case might be. Now, if you're really struggling to come up with a name and you can't think of anything at all, go down to the description and go to the link labeled tag names. It's a massive list of tag names that I created with your guys' help, and all of these tag names are fair use. Nobody on here is a legend. Some of these people might be well known, some of them might be kings, but no one here is a legend, and therefore the names on that list are up for grabs and free to use. Even my own name is on there. Alright, that pretty much wraps up today's video. Hopefully this helped you guys out. Don't forget, if you guys want to double your skill level really easily, pick up the brand new book we came out with in the description down below. It's a comprehensive guide to graffiti. You've heard me talk about it a million times, and plenty of you guys have already improved your skill level. So if you're thinking about hopping into it, I got a link to it in the description down below. And we also have the best how to do graffiti playlist right up here with more graffiti content right down here. I'll catch you guys back here next week. Thanks for watching.